Here we are again, another new opening, and I purposely have a different shirt on today because I looked back over some of my previous videos this semester and realized that there were multiple videos where I was wearing the same shirt. I don't want you guys to think that I only have like 5 shirts in my entire shirt wardrobe. So today's shirt, you're probably not able to see it, but I'm wearing the Bowler School of Business polo shirt today. So yay for the Bowler School. So what we're going to do today and for the next 3 videos is we're going to explore the place component of the 4 Ps. And today's video, we're going to focus on marketing intermediaries, and then the next discussion we're going to talk about marketing channels, and then we're going to spend a video talking about logistics. So, to be fair, most people that teach principles of marketing don't spend a lot of time on logistics. I have a very different approach. Logistics is again my alleged area of expertise, and I believe that logistics is a very strong place, no pun intended, in the marketing discipline. And when I do this discussion in class, I always have a dilemma of, do I talk about marketing intermediaries first, or do I talk about marketing channels? And one of the things to take away from these 2 discussions is that there's a tremendous amount of overlap and interaction between marketing intermediaries and marketing channels. You really can't talk about marketing intermediaries without mentioning marketing channels, and you can't talk about marketing channels without mentioning marketing intermediaries. So we'll talk about, in this video, we'll talk about marketing intermediaries, and we'll do several things in this video. We will define what a marketing intermediary is. We're going to focus on retailers, and then within retailing, we're going to talk about categories of retailers, as well as an emerging concept known as omni-channel retailing, which quite honestly could fit just as well in the channels, because in the word omni-channel you have channel, but I'll talk about it in this discussion. So a marketing intermediary refers to an organization that facilitates exchange and purchase of products between the manufacturer and consumer. So again, a marketing intermediary can be defined as an organization that facilitates exchange and purchase of products between the manufacturer and consumer. And the most commonly known marketing intermediaries are wholesalers and retailers. And there are other types of marketing intermediaries as well. There are what are known as agents, and there are brokers. But again, the most common marketing intermediaries are wholesalers and retailers. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm going to focus on retailers for a very similar reason as to why we focused on consumer behavior and consumer products. Quite simply, the majority of you, as well as myself, have had a lot more experience in our lives with retailers than we've had with wholesalers. And if you've had experience with wholesalers, that's great. And we could talk about them, but I like to keep the discussion at a level where people can at least say, yeah, I get this because I've dealt with retailers on a regular basis. And so a definition of retailing or retailers refers to a set of business activities designed to add value to products sold to customers for their use. So retailers, a set of business activities or a business designed to add value to products sold to customers for their use. And so one of the things that I like to point out, or like to emphasize with that particular definition, is notice that the word value is in there. And we had talked earlier in the course about value, and one of the things that distinguishes today's marketing from when I took my Principles of Marketing course back in the spring of 1977 is this emphasis on value, and we'll see when we talk about marketing channels, we'll see value in there as well. So again, a set of business activities or a business designed to add value to products that are sold to customers for their use. So, you think about it, say, okay, so give me an example of a retailer. Well, McDonald's would be an example of a retailer. Let's see what else. Nordstrom's would be an example of a retailer. Jiffy Lube would be an example of a retailer. United Airlines would be an example of a retailer. And we could give many more examples of retailers. Okay? So what we're going to spend the majority of time in this video talking about are different categories or different ways that retailers can be categorized. We're going to talk about three. We're going to talk about the amount of service provided, we're going to talk about an organizational approach, and we're going to talk about product line. So in terms of the amount of service provided, one way that retailers can be classified is whether or not they're what are known as full-service retailers, or whether they are more of a self-service retailer. And so with a full-service retailer, what you will find is that retailer has a tremendous number of in-store personnel. So it wouldn't be just people kind of manning, no gender meant there, manning cash registers and maybe somebody restocking the merchandise. Rather, you're going to see salespeople and maybe just customer service representatives walking around. So if you've ever been to, let's say, Nordstrom's provides an excellent example of a full-service retailer. On the other hand, there are self-service retailers, and this is where the customer provides most of the service. So, if you think about, for example, if you go into a convenience store and the convenience store has a gas station attached to it, and assuming we're not in the state of New Jersey, you're doing a lot of that stuff on your own. In fact, you may never even deal with, if you're pumping gas, you use a credit card of some type, you will not interact with even the cashier. And even if you go into, let's say, the convenience store portion of a gas station, the only interaction that you might have with a store employee is when you pay for what it is that you bought. And increasingly, what some retailers are doing is they're adding, self-serve lanes or self-serve kiosks. So again, as I mentioned in an earlier discussion, I do a grocery shopping at Giant Eagle. Giant Eagle has self-serve lanes. You go into Home Depot has self-serve lanes. You go into Walmart has self-serve lanes. So what you got retailers that are, kind of adding, self-service characteristics. You go into, a McDonald's these days, and unlike maybe even 15 years ago, if you're going to get soda, you get your own soda rather than waiting for a counter person to fill your soda for you. All right, so we've talked briefly about the amount of service provided. A second way that retailers can be categorized is in terms of their organizational approach, and we'll look at two approaches. There are many other approaches that we could discuss. Pardon me while I take a sip of iced tea here. There are what are known as independent retailers, and these refer to locally owned and operated retailers. Right. And in the Cleveland area, for example, there's what is known as the Cleveland Independent Restaurants. And periodically, the Cleveland Independent Restaurants sponsor a kind of a fixed price, 3-course meal, $33, and participating members of the Cleveland Independent Restaurant Association. If you go there, you will get an appetizer, you will get a main course, and you will get dessert. It'll be $33. Examples of Cleveland Independent Restaurants would be Blue Canyon, which is down in Twinsburg, and Flower, which is over in Moreland Hills. Let's see what I'm trying to think of. And there are a number of other members of Cleveland Independent Restaurants. So you've got the independent retailer. It's a locally owned and operated retailer. And then you have the what many of us are familiar with, the chain stores or chain retailers. And one definition of a chain retailer is 10 or more stores that are operated under one brand name and have a central headquarters. So again, one definition of a chain store is 10 or more stores that are operated under one brand name and have a central headquarters. So for those of you who might be from the Rochester and Buffalo area, Wegmans, the grocery store, would be an excellent example of a chain. Zara, the fast fashion retailer, would be an example of a chain. Chipotle would be an example of a chain. Jiffy Lube would be an example of a chain, right? 10 or more stores that are operated under one brand name and have central headquarters. And a third way that retailers can be classified is in terms of product line. And the book does a really nice job of identifying and briefly describing / discussing different kinds of retailers based on product lines. So, you have what are known as general merchandise retailers, you have department stores and Nordstrom's and Dillard's would be examples of department stores. You have specialty stores, and so something like a Pandora or a Claire's would be an example of a specialty store. And why the discussion of product lines is important is there's a couple of reasons, and one is the blurring of distinctions across product lines. And so when I was your age, and when I took my Principles of Marketing course, the thing in 1977, yeah, you've told us that 50 times already. It was pretty clear what a retailer was in terms of its product line. Today, the classification by product line isn't as easy. And so if I were to ask you what is Walmart, for example, right? Well, a lot of us think of Walmart maybe as a discount type store. And yet Walmart, by dollar volume, Walmart has the largest sale of grocery items of any retailer in the United States. But we don't really think of Walmart as a grocery retailer, right? And then if you also look at toy sales by retailer, you will find that Walmart sells the most toys in the United States by dollar volume. But we don't think of Walmart as a toy store, right? And so and I'm just using Walmart as an example because, like I said, what has happened with respect to product lines is there's been this blurring across product lines, and so it becomes harder to classify some stores in terms of what they are with respect to product line. And one of the manifestations of this blurring of distinctions across product lines is a concept that's known as retail convergence. And this refers to a variety of retailers who sell the same product at similar prices to the same customers. Right? So again, retail convergence refers to a variety of retailers who sell the same product at similar prices to the same customers. And so there's a lot of different examples that I could give to illustrate this, but the one that I like to use in class, and the one I'll use in this video, is appliances. And so if we go back 50 years, and you say, excuse me, Doc, I'm not 50 years old. You might be 50 or more years old. Yes, I am more than 50 years old, but we're not 50 years old. Well, I know that. But just to give you an illustration as to the kind of the retail convergence and the blurring of distinctions across product lines, I like to use appliances as an example. And so in 1965, and even in 1975, for matter of fact, most people, bought their appliances at what were known as appliance stores, which in the 60s and into the 70s we'll classify it as a specialty store, right? So if you needed a refrigerator, if you needed a washer and dryer, you needed a dishwasher, you needed a stove, right, an oven, you went to an appliance store, because appliance stores, guess what, sold appliances. If we fast forward to today, right, 2017, right, where can you buy appliances? Think about where you can buy appliances. Well, appliance stores still exist, but they're becoming somewhat obsolete, right? And in fact, a really long-standing Northeast Ohio appliance store, B&B Appliances, just earlier this year announced that it was going out of business after about 90 to 95 years in business, and in part it could not compete anymore because of this idea of retail convergence. Because again, as I asked you a minute and a half ago, is where can you buy appliances? Well, you can buy appliances. You can buy appliances at a Home Depot or a Lowe's. You can buy appliances at a department store like a Sears or a J.C. Penney. And you say, wow, you can buy appliances at a Best Buy, right? And so now there's a lot of different places. And if you think about a Home Depot or a Lowe's, nobody would classify them as appliance stores, right? If you think about a Sears or a J.C. Penney, nobody would classify them as appliance stores. If you think about a Best Buy, nobody would consider it an appliance store, and yet there's all these places. And you say, excuse me, Doc, what about online? Oh yeah, how about online? Yeah, you can buy your appliances online now as well. And so, right, and you say, well, okay, so what is all this like retail convergence stuff? What does this mean? Well, it has distinct marketing implications. And one of the implications, a basic implication, is because you can buy these products in many different store types, right, price becomes more important, right? The competition tends to lead to lower prices. So it's now much simpler. Back 50 years ago, you went to an appliance store and you looked at the price and you said, okay, I may not like the price, but sometimes if your refrigerator breaks down, you need a refrigerator, right? And, you don't want to be eating out for forever, so you buy a refrigerator, right? You kind of don't have much choice. Now, right, you go into a store and you look at the price, and you can have your smartphone with you, and you can do a price comparison app, and so price has become a much more important thing with this concept of retail convergence. All right, so we talked about some categories of retailers, and we'll conclude this discussion by looking at multi-channel retailing / omni-channel retailing. And so when we talk about multi-channel, it's retailing that uses a number of different channels to reach a customer. So, for example, you got brick and mortar, right, store. Those are the physical stores. You've got catalogs. You've got websites. All right. So those are different channels, different ways that customers can be reached, right? And multi-channel retailing is ubiquitous, pretty much ubiquitous today. Back 50 years ago, you pretty much had brick and mortar, and you had a little bit of catalog going on, and that was about it. Right, but today you got brick and mortar, you got catalog, you got websites, you got kiosks, which are considered different than brick and mortar because kiosks are considered much more portable than brick and mortar kinds of stores. And an emerging area within the multi-channel is what's known as omni-channel. And I view omni-channel as a tweaking of multi-channel. And what omni-channel does is it aims for consumers to have a seamless shopping experience in the sense that it doesn't matter what platform a customer is using to order, nor does it matter from where an order is filled. And you say, what the heck does that mean? So to give you an example, and this may sound like ancient history, and it is ancient history. Well, when you go back to when the mid-90s, when online retailing started to evolve, you placed an order online, and that order basically got delivered to you as a customer. It's still possible to do that today, but there are multiple options for, if you place an order online, how you are going to get that order filled. And more specifically, you can now place orders online, and rather than waiting, right, for the order to come to your personal residence, you can now go to stores to have that order or to pick up that order. And what this has led to is a tremendous flux in retailing and in marketing, because your brick and mortar store, which traditionally existed to hold product for when consumers were coming in to buy the product, now some brick and mortar stores are having to function as fulfillment centers and not only hold inventory for people who might be coming in off the street, but also have inventory available if somebody decides that, hey, I want that product, I don't want to have it delivered to my house, I want to go to the store and pick it up. And increasingly, in some cases, the people want the product delivered to their house, but they don't want to wait a long time. And so now what's happening is you place the order online, the order goes to the closest store, and store personnel of some type or an Uber type provider will deliver the final order to your house. So I've hit almost the 22-minute mark. I seem to have lost the 20-minute mark, and we'll stop there and see you down the line.